Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. A small community in Ontario is celebrating the opening of a new water treatment plant, ending a boil water advisory and giving hope to the people living there. Michelle Carlenzeg has the story of Shoal Lake 40 First Nations' journey to clean drinking water.
Cheers.
Leaders from Shoal Lake 40 clinked together their glasses in celebration, taking a sip of clean drinking water from their taps for the first time in a quarter of a century. A new water treatment facility will bring clean water to around 300 people, ending a 24-year boil water advisory.
It's about damn time. We struggled for over 20 years with boiled water deliveries, and the reality of the project coming to an end is surreal. This should, like it was said earlier, it should never have happened.
Yesterday, they celebrated the opening of a $29 million water facility, which was funded by the federal government. The community, which sits on the border of Ontario and Manitoba, has grappled with basic human rights for 100 years. It started after an aqueduct was built to transport clean drinking water to the city of Winnipeg in 1919. It cut Shoal Lake 40's access to land and drinking water. Residents have protested and fought for proper road access over the years, and finally, 2 years ago, they welcomed Freedom Road, a year-round path to the Trans-Canada Highway. With Freedom Road and lifting their boil water advisories, Chief Red Sky says the community can start to move forward.
We still need to do some more catch-up on some of the stuff that we're far behind in. This is just the beginning.
Siobhan Green grew up in Shoal Lake 40 and is looking forward to that first sip. She hauled water all through her pregnancy with her daughter Talia and after she was born.
I don't know what it feels like to have clean water. So this is kind of new and I'm just like, oh, my throat. So this is new and it's my new right for my daughter.
After a sunrise ceremony, Green took some tobacco down to the shores of her home. She says it's a new world for her daughter and the generations to come. Michelle Carlenzig, APTN National News, Shoal Lake 40.
To southwestern Nova Scotia now, where National Chief Roseanne Archibald was on a Mi'kmaq boat when it was surrounded by fisheries officers and Mi'kmaq lobster harvesters had their traps seized. APTN's Angel Moore was on that boat when it all went down.
APTN was on a Sabaganagity Mi'kmaq lobster boat, the Sadie C, when it was surrounded by fisheries officers on 6 Zodiacs and a large Coast Guard vessel. The traps were seized, but Marcel Marr, captain of the boat, says he will keep fishing.
Someone's got to stand here and fight the fight, so it might as well be me if I want further generations or my children to participate in our Aboriginal fisheries.
Marr and his crew had argued with the DFO officers earlier that day at Soniaville Wharf. Officers said the tags were not recognized by the DFO and the traps would be hauled. Marcel and his family still went fishing.
Regardless of the situation, I decided to remove the tags and fish under a moderate livelihood for my Aboriginal treaty inherent right.
This was the same day as the federal leaders' debate in Gatineau. AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald was also on the wharf to voice her support for the Mi'kmaq fishers.
Promoting peace by respecting First Nations sovereignty and jurisdiction. Respect and peace go hand in hand. Otherwise, unhealthy conflicts will continue, as we have seen here on the East Coast.
After the speeches, Archibald, Sabaganagity Chief Mike Zack and the other dignitaries went treaty fishing. Zack's crew hauled about 150 pounds of lobster. Back on shore, Zack told reporters he did not expect DFO to intervene.
Just picking on a small person, right, and really trying to hit our people in the pocket, and it's very unfortunate. You know, they had an opportunity to get a bunch of chiefs, a national chief, and they chose not to.
After Zack and Archibald left the area, the Sadie C was surrounded by the DFO. Archibald heard about that and came back on a Mi'kmaq Zodiac, manned by Sabaganagity protectors.
The DFO is like banging up against the boat, trying to stop us from moving forward. that experience, I think, you know, Canadians have to understand that the Mi'kmaq people are really working at just asserting their rights, and this is what happens to them. It's absolutely not right, and it has to be corrected.
Jolene Marr is the captain's sister. She and her family have been fishing for generations and fighting for treaty rights just as long.
That was such an honor to have her come stand with us, my family and I, as we went and asserted our treaty rights, and for her to witness what our people go through on a daily basis here.
Archibald says she will continue to call for the federal government to uphold treaty rights.
Really upsetting to see their traps being taken from them. They have an inherent and treaty right to do the lobster traps, and the DFO is interfering with that. And there's a great injustice that's happening here right now against the Mi'kmaq people and their fishery.
The Department of Fisheries say the Mi'kmaq must fish within the commercial season. The Mi'kmaq lobster harvesters say they will continue to treaty fish any season. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Chibuktuk, also known as Halifax.
The executive director of a First Nation-run child welfare agency in Manitoba has been fired as an audit of the agency's expenses is ongoing. The Southern First Nations Network of Care, which oversees Sandy Bay Child and Family Services, said through a spokesperson the agency became concerned after noticing irregularities back in June. At that time, they took over administration of Sandy Bay CFS and began an operational and forensic review. The review discovered that a company owned by Richard Delaron, the executive director of Sandy Bay CFS, was allegedly leasing property to Sandy Bay CFS. Auditors found Sandy Bay CFS had been running a deficit and, in light of the ongoing review, stopped paying credit card bills belonging to Delaron and his wife. Delaron was in the position for 15 years. A call to reach him was not returned. Well, the last day to register to vote is now gone, but our Michelle Karlenzig has more on how organizations are encouraging Indigenous people to get out and vote.
As Election Day nears, some deadlines are closing for Canadian voters. Today at 6 p.m. is the last day Canadians can register to vote by mail. Sending the ballot in the post can be a better option for people living in remote areas, but not everyone is in their home communities. There are currently about 1,500 wildfire evacuees living in Winnipeg hotels. As far as voting goes, evacuee support staff Jackie Anderson says it's the last thing on their mind.
You know, as a community, we're just so busy right now, you know, just delivering that heart medicine work of, you know, caring for our community, our northern relatives, and that, you know, to be honest with you, we never really thought about the voting and what that's going to look like for them. But, you know, when I think about even just with vaccines and with medication, you know, even the challenges of being able to get a vaccination card, you know, because they either don't have access to internet or, you know, again, their addresses in their First Nations community.
Anderson says this next week, Mama Way hopes to work with the Red Cross to help evacuees get out and vote. Native Women's Association of Canada released a 79-page analysis conducted by Nanos Research, scoring the major political parties in relation to priority areas set out by NWAC. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, along with policing and justice, are just some of the areas looked at. CEO of NWAC, Lynn Grew, says they put more effort than ever into educating Indigenous people on the election.
We really want people to think about engaging this year, casting that vote, because if we don't, we're leaving all these very serious human rights issues for the future. So we say, you know, let's have an impact and let's get out there and vote.
Federal leaders tackled Indigenous issues in last week's debate, and Grew says she hopes it's a record turnout.
We will see on the election day and the results. So as I said, I'm really hoping, and in particular for Indigenous women, I think we need to have our voices heard. And this is one of the ways that we can do that.
You can find more information on voting at electionscanada.ca. Michelle Carlenzing, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To the pandemic now in Alberta has declared a state of emergency because of an increase in COVID cases. Thousands of surgeries have been postponed to free up health staff, and 90% of COVID patients in ICUs are not vaccinated. So what are the next steps for Alberta? Tamara Pimentel has those details from Calgary.
As cases here continue to rise to well over 1,000 a day, Albertans were hit with an emergency alert Wednesday evening, declaring a state of public health emergency. I happened to be sitting in a restaurant as phones went off. Monitors switched from sporting events to the alert, advising the public that new restrictions will be in effect starting Thursday at 12:01 a.m. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney held a press conference apologizing for his government's response to the pandemic.
I know that we had all hoped this summer that we could put COVID behind us once and for all. We believed that we could prudently move away from addressing COVID as a pandemic and towards an endemic. It is now clear that we were wrong, and for that, I apologize.
So what do these new restrictions include? The province announced vaccine passports. Working from home is now mandatory unless it's necessary for employees to be at the workplace. Up to 10 fully vaccinated people can gather indoors, and indoor dining has been shut down. Those rules only apply to residents age 12 and older. More restrictions that target businesses and events will be put into effect September 20th. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
There's much more to come here on your APTN National News Weekend, but first, a quick break. Welcome back. A recovery home dedicated to Indigenous women opened in Calgary last year. The program was so successful that the nonprofit organization behind it has opened several more. As Tamara Pimentel shows us, addiction rates are increasing within the Indigenous community there, and the homes are needed now more than ever.
For Edie Severite, this home was a major turning point in her healing journey. When Red Woman House opened its doors a year ago, it was the first house dedicated to Indigenous women recovering from addictions.
It was like a fresh start. It was awesome. Just being able to connect with other Indigenous women, all with the same mindset. We're all fighting for our lives. I know I certainly was.
Now there are 5 of these homes across Alberta for Indigenous men and women, and it's served nearly 60 people so far. The houses are part of the Oxford House Foundation. Executive Director Earl Thiessen is from Loon Lake in Saskatchewan. He attended Oxford House before opening homes dedicated to Indigenous people.
Seeing the lives of people transform, I've been witnessing it for 12 years. I've been witnessing it in myself. Right, I broke the cycle in my family of addiction and all types of trauma.
Severite is another success story. The 60 Scoop survivor moved in here with the intent of staying for 1 month, and 6 months later she was ready to move out on her own. Now she's been hired as a board member for Oxford House.
You know, my addiction brought me to a very, very dark hole, a very lonely dark hole. And it just seems so far away. But I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for this house. I know that I would not be here if I didn't have this opportunity. Having the connection with elders, being able to attend ceremony that Oxford would give us the opportunity to go to.
What sets these houses apart from other temporary shelters? There is no time limit. There's a sense of family. The residents can make the space their own, and they're located away from triggering areas. Oxford House only asks that residents follow a curfew, attend weekly house meetings, and stay sober. Severite says more of these are needed across the country.
It's absolutely crucial to be able to have a place where you can plant yourself and feel safe. There's not enough. I think there's a lot of hurting people out there who need these houses.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
The latest COVID-19 outbreak in the Northwest Territories is affecting multiple regions. In Yellowknife, those experiencing homelessness are battling the virus with much-needed supports cut off. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us the latest in this story.
These shelters and these services are actually like a safety net for the majority of the people on the streets, and they rely on it.
The latest victim in the Northwest Territories COVID-19 outbreak, the street involved of Yellowknife, who come here for a meal, a shower, or simply for shelter. The day shelter and sobering center are now closed indefinitely after many healthcare workers, shelter staff, and clients contracted the virus.
See how angry he is? He's mad, like he wants in, like, where's he gonna go? Look, he's just walking away. You know what I mean?
Michael Fatt, a frontline worker and advocate, says the fallout for clients, broken trust.
Can we rely on these services? Will they always be there? And it's like, when this happens, it just basically breaks that trust with them.
The Reese says COVID-19 spread quickly through the shelter.
They were carrying a backpack on their back, hiding booze in there, and then they were just running to the washroom and sharing their drinks with the next person they want to drink with.
The territorial government says they're in talks with the city to open an emergency day shelter in an arena.
I have taken note of the criticism. I know people say, why weren't we better prepared? I feel like we were prepared, but what we hadn't factored in was, or what the Disabilities Council as the operator hadn't factored in, is that all the staff could be sick at once and we would need a whole replacement.
Minister Julie Green says the GNWT is accommodating those who need a place to isolate in a nearby hotel.
We seem to be managing okay in the isolation center now. We realize that, it's tenuous. If we have a big increase in cases where we run out of space at the isolation center, then we're going to be looking for more space for temporary accommodation.
But even before the outbreak, clients were turned away from the shelter because of limited capacity due to COVID-19 restrictions. On Monday, the GNWT announced they'd selected this location as a new temporary day shelter this winter and are beginning consultations with neighboring businesses. For Fatt, he says there's room for more input from frontline staff.
These places, they should have a built-in program, a system for each and every individual. They should have identify the challenges, identify the problems, and then step them up. Not just say, okay, fill out this paperwork. Never mind. Fill the paperwork out for them.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
A unique geothermal energy project in northern BC is soon to be up and running. The Fort Nelson First Nation hopes to produce enough clean energy from the project to power 10,000 homes by 2025. APTN's Lee Wilson explains.
A blessing ceremony was held at Clark Lake Field, signaling the completion of 2 geothermal wells in northeastern BC. Fort Nelson First Nation is one step closer to completing one of Canada's first geothermal projects, and it's 100% Indigenous owned. The plant will use heat generated from fluids inside the earth and create renewable energy. Chief Charlene Gale shared the importance of the project to the region.
And we just want to bring a revolutionary project to our community so that we can share it with our neighbors and our relatives up in the north. And there's a lot of things that come with that, whether it's food security or, powering the territory in a way that helps meet our net zero for 2050.
The site was also renamed Tudeka, which translates to water stream in English. It was a former natural gas site, repurposed for geothermal energy. The Fort Nelson region is not connected to BC's main power grid and is still dependent on fossil fuels. The geothermal project will help reduce carbon emissions. Scheduled to be complete by 2025, it is estimated to produce enough clean energy to power over 10,000 homes.
One of the things that's most important and on the forefront of many First Nations minds when they think about economic is environmental stewardship. So there needs to be that balance that happens between the two. You can't have one and not the other, so we have to really find that balance.
Fort Nelson secured nearly $100 million of funding commercially, as well as contributions from the federal and provincial governments. Chief Gale wants 2-day geothermal to provide enough jobs for her people to return home and inspire the younger generation to think of new career paths.
Inspire them so that they can pursue career paths and stay close to home. But the opportunities are nation-building opportunities. It will create sustainable jobs for our community and neighboring communities in Northern Rockies.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Time for another quick break, but stick around. We've got more to come. Welcome back. Before we leave you tonight, some sad news as we express our condolences for the loss of one of our own here at APTN. Matt Thorderson passed away last weekend. He started working with APTN behind the scenes in 2003, then joined the news department in 2006 as a reporter telling stories for APTN News and its affiliated shows. Viewers will certainly remember the impression he made. He could do the serious political stories, but Matt loved the unusual, the quirky, and the offbeat, and he usually added his personal touch to that kind of story.
Toughest challenge of their young careers when they compete for Team Canada at the World Games next year, but they say that they're more than ready for the challenge. Oh. Matt Thorderson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Matt could really ham it up. He was a 60s scoop adoptee, a survivor originally from the Roseau River First Nation south of Winnipeg. In his younger days, he played defense for the Selkirk Steelers junior hockey team. He was 46 years old. Once again, our condolences to Matt's family and many friends. Certainly sad news around here. Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.